Good morning, and welcome to our utility trail webinar featuring National Grid. My name is Sandy Miswitz, and I'm the Executive Director of the Capital Region Transportation Council and the current chair of the New York State Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations. I'll be your moderator today, along with Ethan Townsend of the Transportation Council, and we'd like to thank you for joining us. Utility corridors for trails offer unique opportunities to expand active transportation options throughout New York State and beyond. We hope this webinar provides the information you need to interact with National Grid during the planning, design, construction, and maintenance phases of trails in utility corridors that they own. I'd like to thank National Grid for presenting today, as well as our co-sponsor, Parks and Trails New York. First, some housekeeping. As we have a large number of attendees, there will be no live interactions today. Remember that you can see us and we can't see you, so please post your questions in the chat or in the Q&A windows, and we'll respond to as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. Note that we are recording the webinar and we'll be sharing the slides and a link to the recording with all attendees following today's session. A brief introduction of today's presenters. Kimberly Ireland is the Director of External Affairs for National Grid's Eastern Division. Kim and her team work with municipalities and community organizations across the region's 13 counties, stretching from Essex, south to Columbia, and west to Otsego counties, and all points in between, including Albany, Rensselaer, and Schenectady. Pamela Aspinall has been with National Grid for 13 years in the right-of-way department. Her current role is right-of-way manager of third-party uses. That includes third-party requests and encroachments. She is, and she will be today's primary presenter. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kim to get us started.
Great. Thanks, Sandy, and thanks, Ethan, for reaching out initially to suggest we have this conversation. It's not uncommon for myself and my team, as well as my colleagues across the state, to receive the question, hey, can we have a trail? And as much as we'd always love to say yes, sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is yes, but there's a process that we have to go through. And so we just thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about the process and what it entails. So when folks do have the question, can we, they understand the steps that they have to go through. And Pam will get into all of that. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I have counterparts in different parts of the state. So we operate across New York State. Out in Western New York, my counterpart there is Ken Kajawa. So any of the listeners or participants from Western New York, he's the director for Western New York, and Alberto Bianchetti is the director for Central New York, and they also have teams that cover their regions. So we look forward to the conversation. We look forward to the questions, and certainly the follow-up. We'll make sure that there's contact information in the presentation, so you will see that. This is National Grid specific, and so I know when I was looking at the list, there were some folks from outside of our general service territory. We certainly own property outside of our service territory for our transmission lines, but this is National Grid specific, so those who fall under other utilities, you can use this as a guidance, but it may not exactly align with those utilities. We'd recommend that you follow up with them directly. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Pam, who owns this process and is really she's worked with many municipalities and community organizations during the establishment of trails, and she's a wealth of information. Pam, thanks for taking the time, and I'm handing the mic on over.
Good morning, and thanks Kim, and thanks Sandy and Ethan for putting it, and James. So I think I got all the thank yous out there. And then and good morning to everybody here. And I hope you got, didn't have any trouble finding a parking space, and that you got a good seat, so that we can begin our discussion on recreational trails from a utility perspective. And this is National Grid's perspective. So I just, as we are the world that we live in, just have to put this out. Things always change. We have lessons learned, and this is a guideline, and that's what it's meant to be, that we have a process and we follow the process to be consistent. So the objective, the goal for today is for folks to understand National Grid's process, how to apply, requirements that need to be met before applying, understanding the guidelines for design, what is required for the submittal, and understanding the trail process, including the responsibilities after the trail is built. So National Grid owns, if you were to take our transmission facilities and put them end to end, you could go around the world 2.25 times. So that's a lot of land that we cover. And our first priority is to make sure that we can continue to deliver safe, reliable power, and that the public is safe in operating and engaging in the same space where we have transmission, electric, all of our facilities. So we're dedicated into providing a good, reliable product, and that's to have safe, reliable product. We're out there. We're working, to keep our facilities safe and in good repair. We have flyovers that occur that are by drones and helicopters that we monitor, and we are constantly reviewing our facilities to see if they're in need of attention, so that we can minimize the amount of outages and impact that we have to those that receive the energy. What we're not a recreational company. So if you've joined this morning to book a cruise or to get a flight somewhere, that this is not the place, or a gym membership. But we are committed to work with you. But we have to have it's a really a balance to our ability to utilize the rights of way, the corridors, as what we intended to when we purchased the rights for the facilities that we currently have in them. So we have to make sure that it's safe and that we still have our ability to operate and maintain our facilities. So we've had quite a few projects that we've had go on all over the state. These are just a sample of what we've got. We also work with the New York State Snowmobile Association, and that we have trail licenses throughout the state, and we renew those licenses on an annual basis. And this is really the only time that we allow a motorized vehicle within the rights of way. Again, it's for safety purposes, because if you've got people on foot, you've got a motorized vehicle, you don't have good lanes, there could be an incident that and we do not want. We want to keep everyone safe and as incident free as possible. So, you heard me talk about a couple of different things: right of way, corridor, our property interest, the interest, the real property it's a bundle of rights. And corridors is when you take individual properties and you collect them together to go from one place to the other. That's what our transmission facilities do. That's what the public works, water, sewer does. It transports the service from one location to another. So it has to be a continuous strip. So we also refer to that sometimes as a right of way. Okay. And then the rights of way corridor can be owned in a variety of rights. Fee, National Grid, like I said, is one of the largest property owners in New York State. We own over 4,000 properties. And that, those are the properties, again, that we own, we pay property taxes on. And then there's those that are easement, where we have a non-exclusive, in most cases, easement with a specific purpose, and that is for us to safely operate and maintain our facilities, both electric and gas. So we have network. Our network is vast throughout New York and New England. We have gas transmission pipelines, we have gas service lines, we have gas mains, we have distribution service lines that service customers. We have higher voltage that serve larger customers. We have sub T, T, T meaning transmission facilities. So it ranges. We range up to 345 kV. So that's 345,000 volts. That's a lot of juice. So as I said, that the utility corridors are commonly referred to right of way. So we interchange corridor with rights of way, and that's how we deliver our service, is by the use of these rights of way. So if we have things that are encroaching, that are not compatible, that we don't know about, that could cause a delay. That could cause a delay into re-energizing if we have a storm, or if we have an incident where someone has made contact with our facilities. And we have to limit that activity, and have to have control over that activity. Again, we are dealing with high pressure gas lines, and we are dealing with electric. And unfortunately, they aren't forgiving if you don't treat them right. So a lot of times we have, that our the property that National Grid owns and operates its facilities on, a lot of folks just kind of treat it as, public property. They won't care. They're not here. But we do care, because if the grade is changed, either way, that could cause a clearance issue, and that could, again, create a dangerous situation. So even though we can't be on all 4,000 pieces of property physically, we do have our assets, that it shouldn't be viewed as abandoned. So again, we have a process that we have and we've developed so that we can get all the information, that we can thoroughly review what is being requested to make sure that it's safe, that we can continue to deliver safe, reliable power. So in the amount of construction and building, the connections of green energy into our infrastructure, we have a lot of third-party requests. And third-party means someone that isn't controlled by National Grid. National Grid does have its own, we have contractors, and they're really a third party, but they are controlled by us. So we've developed an email. It's right here, third-party request. So anybody that's got a question, to send that in. It's primarily to that, and that my team all has availability to be able to review and answer questions and requests. So National Grid, Niagara Mohawk, we're like over 500 predecessing companies. We are National Grid. We are Niagara Mohawk. DBA as National Grid is our official title. So this little drawing kind of shows you kind of a play on the paths. It shows you the path to the trail process, to what you need to do. You have your initial request, the initial, you're asking about it. You're saying where you want to be. on this earth. And then we're going to look at, do you agree to indemnify us? And do you have the funding to build? And then do you have the funding to compensate for the review of what the request is? So once we get that, then we look and we identify it at a high level. If we don't have full plans, we can't see all the pitfalls. We can see for high level if we've got projects going in there, in the future, in the next couple of years, if we've got something going. If this is an area of the blue butterflies, the lupins, environmental risks, that we are able to identify that those exist. So once we get to that point, then we put together an agreement, and that agreement is what we're going to do with our through our review and the compensation that would be due to the company for its review. So then you would submit your PTR, and we are going to go through the elements of the application later on. And then if there's any conflicts, what we do with a conflict, and then if we're good to go, we go to a license agreement, and that sets the stage for what's to occur. Then at the end, we reconcile. So if we have money left or vice versa, that we can even it out and have a zero. So the key requirements, again, as I said, for the initial is to meet National Grid's insurance. The public is using it, and we got to make sure that if someone is hurt, that National Grid would not be responsible. So anybody who has a trail or use of, then they would indemnify the company. Again, the proof of funds to construct, and any associated costs with the with National Grid reviewing. And then potentially it could also be that there needs to be a modification. There needs to be a modification either with the plan, what you propose, or National Grid's facilities. So this outlines what the submission should have. We need it in writing, all right? That we have everything there, basically your who, what, where, when, why, and how. So like I said, we have a cost reimbursement agreement, and that says what National Grid is going to do, what the third party is going to be doing, what the fee is. We do an approximate based upon our previous trail reviews. And again, some could be returned, and then, some may there may be amount due. And that really is on the complexity, and then two, how thorough the information provided to us is. If we get everything that we need right off the get-go, then there's not that back and forth. That reduces time. So the requester, the third party, they're responsible for any costs, any cost for modification to National Grid's facilities and for the review. And we could, during the process, if inspect, just to make sure that things are being done properly. Again, that's for everyone's safety. So there's a lot of things, there's a few things, priority things that we look at. And again, every situation is different, and every situation brings on a different set of concerns. But again, high level, it's safety. It's the protection of the National Grid infrastructure. It's maintaining National Grid's access to its facilities, because if we can't get in there to fix them, it doesn't work. We're not going to get the power back on, or we're not going to check out a gas line. So access is very important, and we have to maintain the same level of access that we had. So it can't be harder. So our access cannot negatively be impacted. And then I also touched upon environmental impacts that, we're sensitive to the environment. We're looking at the environment. Out east, we have a lot of the lupin patches that we have to be sensitive to because of the butterfly. And then there's a turtle that's out there in the east. And then we have the bats. That certain activity cannot go on during certain times of the year. We have osprey. The osprey nest can't be disturbed. So there's a slew of environmental factors that could play on where you site your trail. And National Grid tries to do the right thing. We also have to look at future use. National Grid, as I had mentioned before, that we've got a lot of green energy interconnecting with the National Grid network. So there's a lot of projects going on our transmission electric corridors to be able to modernize our facilities to receive this green energy. So what's allowed? All right. Basically, if you just took what we review, what's allowed is going to be things that do not negatively impact our operational needs. And there, for the trails, no motorized vehicles except accessibility devices. And then, like I said, we have annual snowmobiles, and that is the one exception. And then, again, for safety reasons, to minimize our damage, which would cause power lossage. These are the things that we don't allow: grade changes, fill, or any types of excavation that we need to have a control. There are, we standardly say grade changes, right? Because you're dealing with overhead electric. There must be a certain clearance. So if you increase the grade, then we don't have the clearance that's necessary typically. So then the facilities would have to be raised, or the grade would have to be kept the same. There are things that kind of go without saying is structures, again, because they're up off the ground, they create a clearance issue. Pools, water and electricity just do not, they just don't mix. And then we get to the more sensitive stuff like septics and wells. In order for them to work properly, they can't meet H25 loading. So when we're in our rights of way, our equipment can weigh over 100,000 pounds. So if there was a well or septic in there, it would most probably be destroyed. So that's why those particular occupations are typically not allowed. The motorized vehicles, unsafe activities, hunting. And hunting, again, if you've got folks walking out for a trail and somebody, sees a deer or whatever they're hunting and they get excited and not pay attention, somebody could get hurt. And the same thing with our employees that are inspecting and then repairing. And then the other thing is to have work happening when, the use happening when National Grid has work. A great example of that is, it wasn't National Grid working, but it was the Champlain Hudson Power Express. And that, they were utilizing the Veterans Bike Trail, and that trail had to be shut down while the other third party was doing its work to install an underground DC cable from Canada down to New York. So you may ask, Well, this is National Grid property. These are National Grid facilities. Why do I need to provide the detail, the heights, the wire heights? Well, most of this property we purchased prior to the 1970s, the bulk of our property. And either man or Mother Nature has changed the landscaping. Mother Nature can erode and can also deposit dirt. And then we have folks that may, do it accidentally or knowingly, add soil, remove soil, and change the grade. So we need to make sure that the conditions that we are looking at and that we are reviewing are consistent with what is there presently. And that's why, too, in this, we also ask if there's a gas line present, that the gas line be potholed. So in order to gain this information, to either pothole or doing survey activities, you need an agreement with National Grid, a right of entry that says that we're granting you permission to be on a specific piece of property with no vehicles, with surveying apparatus only. So it limits. And then if you're doing vac, it will say that you're allowed to vac. We define where the actual potholing is to be done, and it is part of the UDIG, and a watch guard will be there to assist with that to make sure that the potholing is done safely. So what do you need to include? Your scope of work, your project schedule. Again, project schedule is important so that we can look at our work schedules. A full set of plans and profiles and KML files. The KML files are very helpful because then we can overlay them with the National Grid assets, and we can see their relationship a lot easier, and then something might have been missed on paper that we can see in our by reviewing it, overlaying. The important thing is to understand what the relationship of the use is with National Grid facilities. How far is it from a structure? What is the clearance in that area? What's the depth of the gas line in that area? And then how are you building it? What are you bringing? How are you building the trail? The size of equipment matters because the size of equipment, again, matters for clearance. Again, profile of the trail, why that matters is if you are increasing the grade, right? You're adding crushed stone there, then you're increasing the grade and you could impact clearance, or then that would create a deficiency. Overhead wire heights, if they're present, so any crossings underneath the electric transmission lines, we need to know what the height is. And then too, the important thing about wire height is knowing at what time of the day, the date, time, and weather of when these wire heights are taken. Because our wires are kind of like clotheslines. So on hot, humid days with a lot of service going through them, our lines will sag more. They get heavier. Just like when you put a lot more clothes on your clothesline, it sags. So does our electric lines. So what the height is on a 30-degree day is going to be different to when it's on a 93-degree day. And we have a model that we put it through, and that we basically create a perfect storm and know what our lowest sag is going to be at that particular location. Again, the re-emphasizing gas, we need to know the location. An example that I can give about that is we had a gas line in the central region where a farmer was farming over it. The gas line originally was installed 16 feet below the grade, and the way that the farmer plowed the field. Mother Nature, with the rain, eroded most of the depth of cover off within 10 years. So again, it's being consistent. Our gas lines, we're always looking for ways to improve safety. We now have these pig launchers that go through and can alert us of some blemishes in the line and when conditions just don't seem to be right. To show that you have approved funding for both the construction and the maintenance, so the future. Because, again, Mother Nature, the trail could wash, so it needs to be fixed again. Everybody has to be safe. The contact information, who would execute. A lot of these we can do through DocuSign, and we can, cut the lead time out because we can just put it in and one person signs and then the next. The equipment list with the specifications. Like I said, that's important because then we know what height that equipment that's going to be in that area. And then ensure that all environmental permits are in place or that they've begun, the application has been filed, or proof that they're not. If the DEC says there's no permit required, then have that in writing and include that in your application. What happens if there's a conflict? What if National Grid says, oh, what you're asking can't happen? There's two ways. There's two paths forward. One path forward is a redesign, to redesign the trail so that it is compatible. The other thing would be to pay to have the facilities altered, the facilities relocated. In most cases, it's increase in height. So there's certain activities that National Grid has to restrict, and there are requirements. There are distances, like we like folks to be at least 50 feet away from a structure, so that prevents damage to the structure. If getting closer, then bollards are put in place that it would prevent damage. That's another way of addressing it. And then the agreement that we do, it outlines and it explains specifically what's allowed and what's not allowed. So again, a pool is not going to be allowed. Motorized vehicles are not going to be allowed. Maybe the signage may not be allowed to be put over the top of the gas line. It would have to be off of the gas line, a safe distance. But all of that, and with the plans, there is a written agreement that would explain what's been approved. And again, in order to utilize National Grid property, there should be written permission from the company. It's trespass just like it would be with any other landowner. So what do we do is we would offer a non-exclusive license if the use can be allowed. So right now in this picture, you can kind of see this is our big work. So this work here, as you can see, it would not be safe for somebody to be walking through here. You got equipment moving, but this is the big picture of big work that we've got currently going on in many of our rights of way. We do not grant easements for trails because the easement affects National Grid's ability to respond to future operational needs. A license can be canceled at any time for any reason, especially for failure to comply with the license agreement. So if we're a few years out and the trail has gotten bad repair and nobody's responding to fix it and a certain time period is going on, National Grid would unfortunately have to step in to make sure that that again the license would be canceled, and we would again need to make sure that no one is hurt. So these are the things that that third party is a trail that you would be responsible for. They're all the things that we've talked about in the submittal, and it goes on. We just don't get to that time period of we've done the letter, we've done the agreement, and we're done. It continually has. We have to be vigilant with it. And again, I can't reiterate enough that when we have a project, we need the commitment that the trail is going to be closed and that it's secure so that we don't have pedestrians walking, jogging with their headset in where they can't hear equipment in a work zone. Okay, so now we're at the end again. Contact information to email third-party requests at nationalgrid.com. That is really the best way. Most of my day is being on the phone and in meetings. So it is usually very hard for me to correspond or to grab that phone call. So the best avenue is third party requests, and then we can set up meetings to discuss any questions that there are.
Well, thank you very much, Pam. Ethan, could you go through the questions and answers? And we'll give answers, obviously.
Definitely. I'll kind of group them together with like questions. The first two, I think, were for Kim from the beginning. The first one was from Mike Alexander, who asked if we could include or share the contact names for your counterparts in Central and Western New York. Oh, looks like you're muted, Kim.
Sorry about that. We have Kenneth Kajawa and Alberto Bianchetti are my counterparts, and I will, once I get to the chat part or the typing part that's not the host and the panelists, I can put that in because I will botch somebody's spelling if I say it out loud. So absolutely happy to do that.
Awesome. Yeah, the second question was just then if you could share Kenny Kajawa's contact information. So it sounds like we'll get that into the chat. All right. The next question was, will the slides be available after the webinar? I know we are sharing the recording, but will people be able to get a copy of the slides as well?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Okay. The next question was from an anonymous attendee who asked if all of these requirements apply to National Grid owned corridors that don't currently have any infrastructure installed, if there is such a thing.
Yes, we do actually have some vacant corridors, and it would apply to them. A corridor is very valuable because we or our predecessing company took the monies and the time to collect and put all of these properties together. And again, with all the big work that we've got, we're looking at every single one of these corridors. So the corridors have to be treated as though they have facilities in it. Of course, your clearance is, you got to pass on clearance. You don't have to provide the wire heights because there is none. And that we would look at when we constructed, is this going to cost more money to construct? So the larger the towers, the more money that they cost. Some of our facilities, just one structure can cost over $1 million. So, and then, you can look at the wooden poles. They're a lot less. They're in the thousands. So again, it depends on, how much more cost it would be. So we would look at that. But usually with a trail, I can't foresee anything. But again, times change, things change a lot and we evolve. So you can never say never. But I guess that would be the best thing is you have to treat it as though we had something there.
That makes sense. All right. The next question, I'm going to skip down one and then go back. This one was when you were talking about grading on trails. Someone asked, what about scraping the bare ground for an established trail tread? So I assume this is where there's already an existing, footpath. They're asking about just clearing that to make it more even.
So then I would have to ask, was that footpath reviewed initially? Okay, and if it wasn't reviewed initially, then, we have to. So if there's an agreement in place, okay, so somebody did an agreement in place and it was just a footpath, and then they wanted to change it to gravel, then they would need to come back to us to modify their request and show what it is they're going to do and how they're going to do it.
That makes sense. All right, next question, and then this first part of the question following it, are e-bikes allowed on these trails where they're established?
They are motorized, and I know that some of them are very hard to control. So it would still be no, okay, because they are considered a motor. It's just like if you have an electric car, do you consider it not a motorized vehicle?
The next question then asks, does a potential trail group need to provide a plan for how they'll prevent/mitigate motorized vehicles, or are bollards placed in trail entrances assumed to prevent motorized vehicles entry into trails?
Yes, we look at that. Again, it's the width. So if you don't have the width large enough for a vehicle, that does prevent it. And then we have, we leave it up to the third party to provide us with the plan that they want. I mean, there's creative ways. I mean, boulders. I mean, there's a lot of methods that you can utilize to get the same result. So we don't say you need to put ballards in. We don't say you need to put a fence in. We allow your own creativity on how you're going to prevent that type of activity.
Great. The next question was asking if you have an example of the best and most successfully implemented recreational trail on National Grid property so that people can use that as a sort of reference point.
Oh, I don't think I can. Kim may be able to a little bit better than I, but we have them all around the state. So I guess the best, how I would answer this is the best trail would be the best communication. Okay, transparency and communication. That is really the key in the success of a trail. If you follow the guidelines, okay, that's the number one, but it's that communication. Don't assume. Let's have a discussion and let's talk.
Now, I know we played a large role in the Empire Trail, which was supported by the state. That was a state project. So that probably would be a good example, but not all organizations have the resources that the state has. And certainly I know there were some state folks I saw in the RSVP. So we appreciate that partnership with the state on that. I live in Saratoga County. We have the Veterans Bike Trail that Pam mentioned. That trail had a vision long before it was a trail. And so to Pam's point, there was a lot of communications. There was a lot of partnership getting to the point where it was actually constructed. So, it is making sure that there's two-way conversations and communications right up front.
Great answers.
Add to that too, is because I gave me a minute to think here. So we actually just partnered, and again, it's that partner where something very positive came out on both sides. Alco, and they're up there in the city of Schenectady, and they had requested us to use our property to extend their trail. And through our review, it came out that the substation right there, we have poor access to that substation. And the reason it's poor access is there's odd and even parking on the street, and it's a narrow street to begin with. And when folks don't pay attention to what side they have to be on, We can't let it's hard for a vehicle because I actually was there. It was hard for me to drive down it with a car, and I don't have a big car. I can't imagine our crews going down there. So many projects on that substation had to be canceled due to our access. We had 5 years ago prior tried to gain access another route, and the landowner that was there, for whatever reason, it didn't come to a fruition that we could get an alternative access. So, in working with ALCO, the trail, they assisted us with the negotiation, and National Grid purchased the land that we tried to do 5 years ago. And then we allowed the trail. So there's, parking and whatnot on there. And it was redesigned so that National Grid also had access, an alternative access to the substation, so that that portion of the trail was built to withstand our vehicles. National Grid did pay for the extra design and for the extra work that needed to be done. But that was a perfect partnership. And again, it was the communication between National Grid and ALCO, what the needs were. And we had a very successful outcome.
Great. The next question comes from someone who does not live in an area served by National Grid, but they're just trying to get a sense of how this works in a very broad sense. And they're wondering if you can give a sense of the magnitude of the fees that are typically required for an application for a trail through National Grid.
I'm going to have to do that on a case-by-case basis to see that. But, the other utilities are going to be doing the same thing that we're doing, in that, they want to make sure that the public is safe, and they want to make sure that to protect the National Grid facilities. It doesn't change, but the thing that is a little bit different from National Grid from other utilities is National Grid owns a lot of land. Okay, there's not other utilities are mostly in easement. Many of our pre-existing transmission lines are owned in fee, meaning that we are the holder of the deed.
Panda, if I could just add to this and you can chime in. When we do projects and when we do work, we maintain and operate a lot of wires, a lot of pipes. And when we do a project at the request of a customer, and if the only reason we're doing that work is because of that customer pays for it. And the same would ring true for trails. If we are doing work, and that includes reviewing a proposal, reviewing projects, that cost is because of that trail. So it's not just, it's time reviewing. And so those fees and costs, are built, is built around that. So it's just a little bit of sense. It's not just, hey, here's, the dog license fee. Oh, here's a check and it goes into the town coffers there, that helps offset the cost of the work that's getting done to accommodate or to review the trail proposal.
I'm going to expand upon that. So that whenever a third party comes to us for use of National Grid property and whatnot, we have to keep the ratepayer whole. Okay, so it's not a company project. So it's keeping the ratepayer whole. And when National Grid licenses out property with fee, that money goes into a special account so that it is then put to offset a race case. So there are instances, so it's not going to National Grid's bottom line. It's going to keep the ratepayer whole.
Great. The next question, there's another one later that we'll ask at the same time, asks if trails can be approved on National Grid right-of-way that's owned in fee, does this same process apply to National Grid facilities over easements?
It does. And the reason that it does is because it really doesn't matter who owns the land for somebody to be safe. It's the behavior. Okay, National Grid still has a right to be there. We have the right to, our easement gives us the right there to successfully operate and maintain. So yes, it would be that. And again, it's because someone else owns the land, it doesn't give them a Teflon shield that they're not going to be hurt. And again, safety has to be our number one priority.
And to go along with that, someone asked, is there an easy way for people applying to National Grid to determine if a particular property is owned in fee or if it's an easement use?
By going to the county websites, ImageMate for the different counties, they usually have the maps, and you can click on and see who the owners of the property are.
Great. Next one's a bit of a unique one. Someone asks how this process applies for canoes or kayaks going underneath overhead National Grid lines where they cross water.
So a lot of times that's done, it could be done through the canals. So if they're navigable waterways, and that is something that we review with the canals and the owners of the waterways. And if there's docks, we also look at the clearances when you're dragging boats in and out of the water. So I'm thinking that's what we're talking about, and not, creeks or.
Yeah. Great. The next question asks, if National Grid can cancel a license for any reason at any time, what, if any, protections are provided for the applicant's investment in the trail?
So most of the time, again, in that slide, it is for non-compliance. Okay, non-compliance, or that we would be incompatible, that we're no longer compatible. We can't give any assurance that it could go in, can go on, because again, National Grid is a regulated company by the Public Service Commission. National Grid cannot dispose of any permanent rights without doing a Section 70, without asking the Public Service Commission, can we do this? So to grant an easement, to sell a piece of property, to do a lease, all of those are regulated activities that we have to provide to the Public Service Commission. And the question the Public Service Commission, the one is they're going to ask is, are we keeping the ratepayer whole? And two, are you sure National Grid doesn't need this property to continue to deliver safe, reliable power?
Right. And Pam, if I can add to that, I think the protection, Pam started that answer with largely due to non-compliance. So that goes back to the communications. If we see something, you're going to hear from us. I mean, we have real estate folks who do check out these, they check out our right-of-ways. And so if there's a trail there, they'll be checking out the right-of-way. So, I mean, part of a lot of that goes back to that need for communications and, the license were established where it all began with. I would also say, going back to the communications, if we anticipate there being a need for us to utilize our property, you're going to hear from us. So we shouldn't be revoking a license or showing up unless it's an emergency randomly. So, I mean, it goes back to that communications and making sure that the third party and National Grid we've got that open line.
Makes sense. The next question is not so much a question, but is rather a compliment. It's someone who works with the New York State Snowmobile Association and says that working with Pam and her team have been great and want to thank you for making it such a seamless process. The next actual question is, does National Grid allow trailheads, in parentheses, kiosks, and or small parking areas within the corridor to serve those trail facilities?
Yes, if it's compatible.
Great. Next question. Once a letter of intent is submitted with the sponsor name, location, description, etc., what is the typical turnaround time for a response from National Grid?
Probably about a week.
Great. The next one is similar and asks, for early stage trail planning inquiries where we're not yet proposing a final alignment or design, what is the minimum information you'd recommend submitting to get meaningful feedback?
The location, the route. So if on like Google Earth, you could provide the trail showing where it's going, what the composition, how wide do you think it's going to be? What are you making it out of? Is it gravel? Just a high level of the area and the composition.
Makes sense. Our next question, I'm going to bundle a couple together that seem to be asking about a similar topic, which is that oftentimes trails rely on grant funding, often state or federal, which requires some sort of letter of support or at least acknowledgement from National Grid. For many other property owners, that would require approval from that property owner, but National Grid won't grant approval until the funding is in place. So how can folks get some level of approval or okay, or maybe a letter that we're generally supportive of this, so that they can get that grant funding to make that final proposal to National Grid?
Many of our trails that currently exist have that funding. And basically, we give a letter of support as long as they are able to meet our conditions that National Grid will cooperate and, try to facilitate to the best that they can. But again, you have to meet the requirements.
Yep, that makes sense. So then maybe a good follow-up to that would be, what are the specific things they would need to get that letter of support prior to approval so they can get that funding in place?
So that would be like I said, the location of where the trail is, providing that it give us a specific of how it's going to be built, who's funding it, where the intent is for the funding of it, and I'm thinking that's pretty much would be it. And then of course you've got to agree to indemnify us. That insurance is a major component.
Great. Next, we have I think a follow up on the e-bike questions from earlier. One individual shares that e-bikes are not defined in New York state law as motorized vehicles, and then another person asks, is National Grid open to a more flexible policy for e-bikes in the future? There's a wide range of e-bikes on the market and regulation is still emerging, but at this point there isn't really an effective way to enforce a no e-bikes policy on any trail where a regular bike could physically get to.
That is correct, and we understand that, but our position right now is that it's not to have motorized.
Great. Someone asks if an existing snowmobile trail can be used as a bikeway/walkway.
Well, I don't see why not, because the snowmobiles, Mother Nature makes the trail, okay, and then it's groomed. So when the snowmobiles are not active, so we would have to look at the season, okay, of them and to see if they can coexist. Again, we've got 2 third parties. And the other example that I gave was Champlain Hudson Power Express. That was another third party in having impact on another third party. So it would impact. It matters on how wide is the right of way. What time are they looking for? Are they looking for it through snowmobile season? Because again, this is why we don't allow motorized vehicles. You got something, the snowmobiles, they go fast nowadays. And we don't want somebody getting hurt. So we want an enjoyable recreational experience. We don't want a tragedy.
And I would suggest that whoever's asking that question, it would have to be, I would imagine, and Pam, correct me, it'd be in partnership with that snowmobile trail, the snowmobile club, because they're the ones that operate, that groom, that protect, and we own a good chunk of the property out there, but those trails go across other people's property. So that would have to be likely multiple parties coming together to turn that snowmobile trail into, say, a hiking or walking trail.
Yep. Again, it's communication, and then part of our PTR review would include that third party. Okay, it would say to them, hey, you know, they're doing this, because we also have, you know, like telecommunication underground. We also have telecommunication above the ground. We may, you know, have somebody have auxiliary parking already. So we would ask that person, you know, if this is going to be an issue, and if this is, we look at the compatibility. Again, we both people have a non-exclusive license, so it really is on compatibility, and we have to look at, in order to know whether or not they're compatible, we have to get input from that third party that's already there. You know, we even got we've got another gas company that's within many of our rights of way underneath, and you know, we want to make sure that their asset is safe as well.
Makes sense. The next two questions are related to design, and the first one asks, is the design guidance established in the Empire State Trail Design Guide still valid? If anyone is able to speak to that.
I didn't work on it, so I'm not sure.
So maybe this next question would be a better follow-up, and so, an individual asks, is there a clear engineering list of design guidelines, as in minimum overburden, worst conditions, wire clearance on the National Grid website, as well as templates for examples of license agreements?
In the PTR application, it gives our requirements in there as far as for the clearance for our facilities. So the things that we, like I said, 50 feet away, you know, we don't like crossing underneath the structure. So, and the different things, it's in the application. The application is pretty extensive to say, you know, what it is that we're looking for, what the minimum clearances are, what the distances are. As far as as I had mentioned before, is that what a line is today on a colder day than what it is on a warmer day. An average person isn't going to know that. And I don't think before somebody uses the trail, they're going to bring out a tool to shoot the wire heights every time they go under there. So what we have to do is when we get that information, we run it in our model and basically create that perfect storm. And then depending on what the voltage is, it depends on the voltage. It depends on what the line is made of, the composition of the line, because certain metals will sag more than others. So there's a lot that goes into effect. And again, I know that it's not the answer that you want to hear, but too, with trails, as long as the trails, they're on the surface, right, there really isn't a clearance because you're at the grade. So where that's going to come into impact is construction of, and that you may have to bring in a smaller piece of equipment due to the clearances. Or again, there's always that option to pay to have the facilities raised or changed in some way so that it's more compatible with the use. There is that option, but again, if trails are on the ground, there really shouldn't be a clearance issue because it's at the grade. All right, where we start to get in is, you know, maybe snow removal, you know, not to stockpile it up, because then you've just claimed the clearance. Some children could, or even adults could, go to the top of the mountain, you know, to the snow mountain and sled, and they might not have the clearance. So again, we have to look at all different uses and aspect. But I really, with the trail, the clearance, it's really not an issue for the actual trail. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. In the interest of time, I think we'll take maybe just one or two of the easier questions. So one is horseback trail riding a permissible use?
To be honest with you, I haven't seen one of those requests. And now
Uh,
that you might have an issue with clearance, okay? Because now you got a person on top of a horse, okay? So, you know, the horses are what, 6, 7 feet, or even larger, depending on what type of horse you got. And then two, from the calls from farmers and stuff like that, I don't think that they don't like our helicopters flying over and our drones flying over too. So that seems to distress horses. And that wouldn't be something that we could control, is when we do our flyovers and that type of stuff. But I've heard that that type of surveillance can spook a horse.
Yeah, they can be a little skittish. One final question to wrap things up. Someone asks if you have a typical timeline from the start of an application to the trail actually being built and usable.
Well, construction, I don't have any, we don't have any, we can't, I mean, we have no control over the construction when, you know, when folks are going to construct. And we don't have any control over folks giving us what we need and when we, you know, at the beginning, making sure that the application is complete. So those are two variables that we don't have. So a typical PTR, typical review, the stakeholders have about 2 weeks. But with something like this, it's more on the realm of 6 weeks. Again, it depends on how long the trail is and how complicated our use is in there. How many lines we have in there? Do we have gas in there? Do we have another third party in there? So those are all variables that can add to the time of it. And then, you know, if we see something on there that, you know, we want changed, we give it back and say, can you modify the drawing? And again, we don't have any control on when that drawing comes back. So that's a question. We try to move it internally as quickly as possible, but again, keeping the lights on is our priority. It has to be our priority because that's why we purchased this land to begin with.
A lot of factors that go into one of these applications. All right. Well, there are a couple questions we didn't get to. So if anyone would like to follow up, they can either reach out to us Transportation Council staff or to one of the National Grid contacts that were provided. Thank you, everyone who did ask questions. And I will turn it back over to Sandy to close us out.
All right, great. And thanks again for everyone participating today. Kim, you wanted to have some last words?
Yeah, and thanks, Sandy, and thanks, Ethan, and everybody who joined. I think at one point we had, 140 people. So that was a great turnout. Appreciate everybody taking their time. You know, we love to work with our communities where we can, and this is an example of that. We start and end all of our meetings with the safety message, or we start our meetings with the safety message. This whole webinar centered around safety and the safe use of our facilities. So, Pam, thank you for that. If I did put Ken Alberto's and my emails in the chat. Again, we lead the teams that coordinate with our communities. And so if you do need something, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll try to get you to the right folks. You know, we have this property because we have a responsibility to our customers to maintain reliable energy services. And so, you know, we look to partner as much as we can. And I appreciate everybody trying to learn how you can do that. So again, thank you for everybody's time. Thank you, Ethan and Sandy, the Transportation Council and Parks and Trails for pulling this together with us, and just go forth, enjoy what is the second day of spring. And as we enjoy some of that warmer weather, we can get out there on the trails.
Great, thanks, Kim. Just as a reminder, we have recorded today's session. We'll provide that link to you via email along with a copy of the PowerPoint slides. And again, feel free to email us with any additional questions that you may have. Thank you again. This has been really informative. Wanted to thank Kim, Pam, and the team from National Grid. And have a great afternoon. Thanks, everybody.